The prison guard who stood 6 feet from Johnny Cash during the legendary Folsom Prison concert kept a secret for 50 years. What he witnessed that day wasn't what made it into the album, and what he finally revealed changed everything we thought we knew about that performance. We all have moments we witness that change us forever. Moments where we see something so raw, so real, that it becomes a weight we carry. For Corrections Officer Thomas "Bull" Brennan, that moment happened on January 13th. But here's what makes this story so shocking. Bull Brennan wasn't just any guard. 3 weeks before Johnny Cash arrived, Bull had been involved in an incident that almost got him fired. An incident that made him the last person who should have been on that stage. And Johnny Cash had no idea. December 20th, 1967. Cell Block D, 2:30 a.m. Bull was doing his rounds when he heard it, the sound every guard dreads, a body hitting concrete, then silence. He ran to cell 47. Inmate Danny Perkins, 26 years old, serving 15 years for armed robbery, was hanging from a torn bedsheet tied to the ceiling pipe. Bull got him down, performed. As Bull walked into the Folsom cafeteria on January 13th at 8:47 a.m., he wasn't just a guard doing his job. He was a man carrying the weight of a dead inmate's accusation, trying to figure out if redemption was possible for the living. Johnny Cash arrived at 9:15 a.m. Bull watched from his position near the stage as Cash walked in with his band. The man in black looked exactly like he did on television, tall, lean, dressed in black from toe to toe. But there was something else, too, a nervousness. Cash kept adjusting his guitar strap, clearing his throat, looking around the cafeteria like he was measuring something Bull couldn't see. June Carter was there, too, standing close to Johnny, whispering something in his ear.
What Bull didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Johnny Cash and Marcus Webb had met before, 5 years earlier. And what had happened between them was the real reason Cash had insisted on performing at Folsom. When all 892 inmates were seated, Johnny spoke into the dead microphone. His voice carried across the cafeteria without amplification. I'm supposed to wait until we're recording to say this, but I'm going to say it now, just to you, just to us. No record company, no radio stations, just the truth between men. The cafeteria went silent. 5 years ago, I was in a hotel room in Detroit with a gun in my hand. I'd been up for 6 days on pills. I'd lost everything. My first marriage, my relationship with my kids, my dignity. I had the gun in my mouth. Bull's hand instinctively went to his weapon. This wasn't in any script. The warden was making cutting motions from the side, but Cash ignored him. Someone knocked on my door. I ignored it. They knocked again. Finally, I opened it. Standing there was a young man I'd met at a bar the night before. I was too high to remember his name, but he remembered mine. And you know what he said to me? Johnny paused, his eyes still locked on Marcus Webb in row 7. He said, "Mr. Cash, I know what you're about to do, and I need to tell you something before you do it. 6 months from now, I'm going to prison for something I did, something I can't take back, and the only—"
Bull Brennan felt his world tilting, because Marcus Webb, the hardest, most violent inmate in Folsom, The man Bull had written up 17 times for assaulting other inmates, was crying. Not subtle tears, full body sobbing, his shoulders shaking, his hands covering his face. And Johnny Cash was crying too. The recording equipment started. The official show began. Hello, I'm Johnny Cash, and the iconic concert that would become legendary. But Bull couldn't focus on the performance. He was watching Marcus Webb. Between songs, during the banter that did make it onto the album, Bull saw Cash's eyes constantly flicking back to row 7, checking on Marcus, making sure he was still there, still listening, still believing. When Cash sang Folsom Prison Blues, the whole cafeteria erupted. That made the album. But what didn't make the album was what happened during the line, "But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die." Marcus Webb stood up. Bull's hand went to his weapon. The other guards tensed. This was it, the moment they'd all feared, the violence they'd expected. But Marcus wasn't attacking. He was just standing, hands at his sides, still tears streaming down his face, mouthing the words along with Cash. And Cash saw him, locked eyes with him, and sang the rest of the song directly to Marcus, like nobody else in the room existed. After the song ended, Cash spoke into the microphone. This part also didn't make the album. "You can sit down, son."
During a break between songs, this was cut from the final album, Johnny stepped away from the microphone and walked to the edge of the stage. He motioned for someone to come closer. Marcus Webb stood again and walked toward the stage. Guards moved to intercept, but Bull raised his hand. "Let him come." Marcus stopped 3 feet from the stage. Johnny crouched down so they were eye level. Bull couldn't hear what they said. The microphones were off. The band was tuning instruments. But he could see it. The 2 men talking. Johnny's hand reaching out, gripping Marcus's shoulder. Marcus nodding, wiping his eyes. Then Johnny said something that made Marcus laugh, an actual laugh, the sound so unexpected in that room full of tension that several inmates turned to look. Johnny pulled something from his pocket, a small piece of paper. He handed it to Marcus, who read it, then folded it carefully and put it in his prison shirt pocket, over his heart. Bull would wonder for 50 years what that paper said. The concert ended with Greystone Chapel, a song written by an inmate, Glenn Shirley, who was actually in the audience. That moment made the album, made history. But what didn't make history was what Johnny said after the last note faded. "Before we go, I want to say one more thing. The man who saved my life 5 years ago told me that believing in change was the only thing that would keep him alive in prison. I don't know if he still believes that. I don't know if any of you believe it. But I'm standing here today as proof that it's possible. Not easy, not..." The concert ended. Johnny Cash and his band packed up. The inmates were escorted back to their cells, and Bull Brennan was left standing on that empty stage, trying to process what he'd witnessed. That night, he went home to his wife and said, "I think I just watched 892 men remember they're human." She asked what he meant. "I don't know yet, but something happened in there today, something more than a concert." The years after, Marcus Webb. Bull kept track of Marcus Webb after that day. It became something he did, not officially, just personally, checking the reports, noting the write-ups. In the 6 months after the concert, 0 incidents. In the year after,
Marcus started attending chapel services, joined the prison education program, requested books from the library. In the 3 years after, Marcus became a mentor for younger inmates, helped de-escalate fights, was voted trustee by his cell block. In 1975, 7 years after the concert, Marcus Webb's life sentence was commuted for good behavior. He was released after serving 15 years of a life term, unheard of in those days. Bull was there the day Marcus walked out of Folsom. He'd pulled some strings to get assigned to the gate duty that day. When Marcus saw him, he stopped. "Officer Brennan?" "Mr. Webb." They stood there, 2 men who'd occupied opposite sides of bars for 7 years, not knowing what to say. Finally, Bull spoke. "That paper, he took away my reason to live when I had none. I'm giving you a reason to change. June 13th, 1973. That's the day you get out. I checked with lawyers. Good behavior, model prisoner, commutation hearing. June 13th, 1973. 5 years from now. You'll walk out of here, and I'll be waiting in the parking lot to drive you wherever you want to go. That's my promise. Now you make yours. Survive until then. Choose better until then. Become the man you told me you could be. See you in 5 years. J.C." Bull looked up at Marcus. "It's 1975. June 13th, 1973 was 2 years ago." "I know. I missed the date. Bad luck on the commutation hearing. Got delayed. Johnny waited in that parking lot for 6 hours on June 13th, 1973. Then he came back the next year, and the next. Finally wrote me a letter saying he'd be there whenever I got out, even if it took 20 more years. Is he here today?" Marcus looked past Bull toward the parking lot. Sitting on the hood of a black Cadillac, wearing all black, was Johnny Cash. He kept his promise. Now I get to keep mine. Bull Brennan worked at Folsom for 12 more years after that day. But everything changed. The way he looked at inmates, the way he spoke to them, the way he saw his job. Danny Perkins had been right. Bull had stopped seeing them as human. But Johnny Cash and Marcus Webb had reminded him. Bull started a program, unofficial at first, then sanctioned by the warden. He called it the Folsom Letters. Inmates could write to him about their lives, their families, their hopes. Not appeals or complaints, just human connection. And Bull would write back, as a man, not a guard. The program saved 3 confirmed suicides and helped dozens of inmates reconnect with families who'd given up on them. When Bull retired in 1980, over 200 former inmates attended his party. Marcus Webb gave the speech. But here's what nobody knew until Bull Brennan finally told the story on his deathbed in 2018, 50 years after the concert. Johnny Cash came back to Folsom, secretly, 17 times between 1968 and 2002. No cameras, no press, no recordings. He would just show up, tell the warden he wanted to visit the chapel, and he'd sit with inmates for hours, talking, listening, being present. Bull was there for most of those visits. He became Johnny's unofficial escort, protecting his privacy, making sure the visits stayed off the record. "Why do you keep coming back?" Bull asked him once in 1987. Johnny was sitting in the chapel with a young inmate who was struggling with addiction. The conversation had lasted 3 hours. "Because Marcus Webb saved my life twice. Once in Detroit, when he gave me a reason to put the gun down, and once here, at Folsom, when his survival proved to me that redemption is real. I owe him more than I can ever repay. So I come back and try to be for others what he was for me, proof that change is possible." "You know he's been out for 12 years now, right? You don't owe him any more." Johnny smiled. "Bull, you still don't get it. This isn't about debt. It's about purpose. Marcus showed me what I'm supposed to do with my second chance. Give second chances. So that's what I do." Bill Brennan died on March 3, 2018, at 93 years old. His family was gathered around: 3 kids, 8 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. In his final hours, he asked them to bring him a box from his closet. Inside were photographs, letters, and one item wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully. It was a prison guard's badge. His badge from January 13th, 1968. "I want to tell you about the day this badge meant something different," he said, his voice weak but clear. He told them everything: the concert, Marcus Webb, Johnny Cash's 17 secret returns to Folsom, the transformation of how he saw his job and the men he guarded. "But," he said, "here's the part I never told anyone. After the concert, after all the inmates were back in their cells, Johnny Cash came to find me. He said, 'Officer, I saw the way you were watching during the concert. You weren't just doing security, you were listening. That means something.'" After Bull died, his family found more in that box: letters from former inmates thanking him, photographs of families reunited, and one letter dated December 2002, a year before Johnny Cash died. "Bull, I heard you're retiring, for real this time," you said. "I wanted to thank you, not just for those 17 visits you protected, but for understanding what we were trying to do at Folsom. It was never about me performing. It was about them, the inmates, being seen as human beings. You got that. You lived that. You made it your mission. That matters more than any album, any award, any recognition I ever got. You changed lives by changing how you saw them. That's the real legacy of Folsom. Thank you, my friend. Johnny Cash." Bull's family donated his badge and the letters to the California State Prison Museum. They're on display now in a small exhibit titled "The Unseen Legacy of Folsom." The exhibit includes the badge, the letters, and one photograph: Johnny Cash and Bull Brennan standing in the Folsom Chapel in 1987, arms around each other's shoulders, both smiling. The placard reads, "The famous Folsom Prison concert of 1968 was more than a performance. It was the beginning of a movement. A reminder that every person, no matter their past, deserves to be seen as human. This badge belonged to Officer Thomas "Bull" Brennan, who stood 6 feet from Johnny Cash during that historic concert. What he witnessed changed how he saw his job, his inmates, and his purpose. For 30 years after Folsom, Officer Brennan treated every inmate with the dignity Johnny Cash showed.
The prison guard who stood 6 feet from Johnny Cash during the legendary Folsom Prison concert kept a secret for 50 years. Not because he was ashamed, but because he understood something fundamental. The real story of Folsom wasn't about the performance. It was about what happened after the microphones turned off. The private conversations, the promises kept in parking lots, the 17 secret returns, the lives changed not by fame, but by presence. Bull Brennan watched Johnny Cash sing to 892 men on January 13, 1968. But more importantly, he watched Johnny Cash see those 892 men as human. And in seeing them, Johnny reminded Bull, and eventually hundreds of others, that we're all just one different choice, one stroke of luck, one moment of grace away from being on the other side of those bars. The album became legendary, the performance became iconic, but the real legacy was quieter, deeper, and infinitely more profound. It was in the letter Marcus Webb kept over his heart for 7 years, in the 17 secret visits nobody recorded, in the badge Bull Brennan wore differently after that day, in the hundreds of lives changed by one man's insistence that criminals